I ran for office a few years ago on the platform really of sort of building local businesses. I grew up in a household of entrepreneurs. My mom was an entrepreneur. My dad actually never in my lifetime I can recall worked for someone else. Was a car dealer growing up, now is a McDonald's owner and operator. And so we kind of got entrepreneurship from day one. And as I kind of campaigned and talked to people, I recognized that in particularly the African American community, entrepreneurship is a really big deal. 70 cents on every dollar that is earned by an entrepreneur is reinvested back in the local community. Particularly, once again, for African Americans, this is a big deal. And so I want to talk to you today about the work that you do. Let's start with you, because you've got a really, really cool sort of media business that I'm always impressed by when I talk to you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Frackle Media?
Okay. Frackle Media, I guess the concept started in 2011 in Las Vegas, Nevada. Met a newspaper man in Las Vegas. I got addicted to the news business and decided to print my own newspaper. Oh, wow. And we printed it, me and my wife. We delivered the newspaper ourselves to about 10,000 homes in an affluent community. And we're losing money. We were printing weekly, so I was daring. I guess I was just ambitious. And a friend of mine communicated some things to me about Google News, and we transitioned. We still had the newspaper going, but we transitioned right into Google News. And within a year, I had about almost 5 million visitors to my website a month. Within approximately maybe 16 months later, or after that, 8 million. And it was over with. I was addicted from that point, because when you have that kind of traffic, advertisers come to you.
And but one of the best parts of entrepreneurship is the fact that, and I think is where you're going, is that it really is the answer for helping the African American community move forward. The idea of working for someone has never been my thing. You know what I mean? It's I worked for a software company and was just going crazy, right? And then got the opportunity to work at the Urban League and was working in a great department, and then got invited to be in the entrepreneurship department, and it was just like, this is it right here. But as far as being an entrepreneur, it's probably the best thing, and I've learned a lot. I get a chance to speak on different panels, speak to young kids about the pitfalls, and I think that's what I like. As being an entrepreneur, I get a chance to bring to the Urban League is there's things that we're able to share because our whole department is made up of entrepreneurs. Which is what our CEO wanted. And it speaks credibility that people are coming, they're learning from actual entrepreneurs, not from someone who said, well, I read this article and I think this could help your business. We've gone through it.
We've lived it.
We've raised money through pitching. We've started companies. We've grown companies. We've sold companies. We've learned a lot of things. And I think being an entrepreneur is understanding that there's no such word as failure when you're an entrepreneur. You just learn from it.
Dimarco Chandler, you were talking about why your media business, which is really fascinating, and what you share with us about Google and those things are just fantastic. But you were talking about particularly why you do work that is sort of more socially connected and that you're having an impact sort of beyond just putting money in your own pocket. Tell us a little about that social aspect of your business.
Well, getting into the news business, I wanted to be, once I started making money in this business, I wanted to find out how to keep it. And also how you keep it, you have to duplicate yourself. Really, I mean, as entrepreneurs, we all know if you want to keep your business, you duplicate yourself within the scope of your business. So I was thinking selfishly, which we all do, trying to keep my business. But in building out, I was able to build some software that went someplace that I didn't know it would go. In other words, I built some software for us to be more efficient, and learned that the software was effectively helping people read better and write better. And when I noticed that, I said, oh, this is changing what we can possibly do. This broadens the people we can not only can reach, but the people that we can help. And I was thinking, I was coming back to Chicago. I said, let me come back to Chicago and see if we can establish an on-campus school. I mean, I almost have to tell you that in order to feed, content is king, as they told you. In order to feed content into my newspaper, I had to figure out some sort of gimmick. Let's just call it what it is, right? And I developed a school. And that school, I taught people how to do journalism. And in teaching them how to do journalism, they would then give back by writing stories for my newspaper.
Wow.
Okay, so I'm building that out. They're writing stories. I'm getting all these positions back or comments back from the people that I train of how this has helped them in their life. I said, I need to take this in the inner city in Chicago, especially because I had a background teaching. I know, teaching college level classes, I know how the kids come into college. They come into college unable to read and unable to write.
Yeah.
I'm teaching freshman classes, large ones, and they're unable to read and write. So that's the idea of coming back into that community and providing a foundation for these kids to be able to read better and write better. And one of the ways, and I know you got to get to somebody else on this, but one of the ways is I was teaching Greek and Latin prefixes, because our kids are just reading for sound. So my application teaches that. In our process, we teach that so that your vocabulary expands. When you look at a word, you recognize what that word means, because you can just break a word up in parts. Our words are made up of Latin and Greek prefixes and roots.
Right, exactly.
And the kids respond to that because when they get home, they're like, I know a little bit more than you, Mom. So it's interesting. What are we doing then when they say that? They're empowered.
That's right.
The idea is then, therefore, I'm thinking, we got to empower these kids, because that way, if they're empowered, they feel like they're empowered. Because if you don't know how to play piano, you ain't going to go home and practice.
Right.
But if you are empowered to learn to play that piano better, you can not only go home and practice, you want to share that with people.
Right. And you'll create.
You want to create, yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So.
Right. So no, that's fantastic. So the Urban League, additionally,
Sure.
you guys shared a little about the impact that you've had, but I'd be interested in hearing a little more about that, because once again, people think of these civil rights organizations.
Yep.
And you would think of this Urban League as a civil rights organization.
Right.
You think about protesting, and you think about that sort of thing, but you don't really think about creating jobs.
That's right.
So I'm interested in kind of you fleshing that out a little bit.
So I think with our entrepreneurship program, one of the things that we've noticed is that, number one, statistically, even though African Americans make up 13% of the population, we only make up even though we make up 13% of the population, we only represent 0.5% of all business revenue. Out of African American businesses, only 5% are able to have full-time employees, as opposed to 21% of white-owned businesses. When you look at the gross annual revenues, as far as what's coming in, the African American businesses only get $58,000 a year on average, compared to $524,000 for white-owned firms. So when we kind of looked at what are these disparities and what's causing these things, we identified it as three particular things. They call them the 3 M's: access to management knowledge, access to new markets, and then access to mentorship. And those are the challenges that African American businesses are facing right now. One of the challenges, the reason that a lot of these businesses fail, is because they're first generation entrepreneurs sometimes, right? Or even if they do have parents that was entrepreneurs, they never learned those sound principles. Nobody went and got an MBA. Nobody went and learned how to, manage your accounting. Then there's this aversion with technology and fear of utilizing technology, where they can utilize things to match their front office and their back office, free things like Google Documents, where they're not utilizing those things. They're still keeping track of all their inventory on paper and things like that. So that reduces their efficiency, which reduces their ability to compete in the market, right? Then access to capital, the money aspect, is well documented. Everybody knows that even when you account for credit score and equal education and equal finance, black business owners get funded less than their white counterparts who have those exact same credentials. So that goes without saying also as well. And then there's the issue where when you're launching a business, where you have issues with your personal credit. And when you first launch a business, your personal credit is how you get access to capital to grow your business. And then oftentimes another thing that we're doing wrong with our money is living hand to mouth, right? So they're so focused on, okay, I'm trying to reduce my tax burden each year, right? As opposed to reporting what they're actually getting. Now it's year 3, year 4. They've made money. They're ready to open that second location. They're ready to hire more people, buy new equipment, but they can't, because when you look at their tax returns the last 3 years, it said they didn't make any money. Right? So those are issues that we are facing as well.
That's very important,
and then last but not least, with the markets opportunity, expanding their network outside of their local, outside of their immediate network, because a lot of times we think our customers are like our cousins, our aunts. Those are the ones who want the hookup,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Well, you got to understand what your ideal customer is and then develop those strategies to go after them. So those are the things that we address in our entrepreneurship training programs, be it, through our, Next Startup program, be it through, one-on-one business coaching. We address those issues and we kind of help, remedy those problems.
That's fantastic. You mentioned that I wanted to talk about anyway, this notion of micro businesses where I've read that 90% of African American businesses are what are called micro businesses with 5 or less employees.
Yeah.
And so there really seems to be this inability to really grow, right? And I love how you mentioned the idea of these sort of lack of access to credit. Also public trust.
Yep.
And I think that is something, I've read somewhere that there's it's called, I guess it's the wealth gap, the trust gap, and the credit gap, right? In those ways. And really, one thing that bothers me when I look at entrepreneurship in the African American community, the urban community, is that there's not only a lack of trust when it comes to banks giving loans, but there's a lack of trust when it comes to customers.
Yep.
Assuming that business is subpar because it is run by a person of color.
That's a myth.
Yep.
Years ago, I did a radio interview on Dennis Snipe. Dennis Snipe, Dennis Snipe.
No, Dennis, yeah.
And we were talking about entrepreneurship and black businesses and customer service. And a woman called in and said, well, I don't support black-owned businesses because their customer service is bad.
And this person, by the way, was probably of color, right?
It was.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, well, where did you go? Well, I went to Evergreen Plaza. This was back in the day.
Sure.
And at the time, I knew all the black-owned businesses in Evergreen Plaza. And I said, well, what was the name of the business? And she said it. I go, oh, that's not black-owned. It's not. And so we have this, what companies have learned, and it's all psychological, right? It's the psychology behind it. Companies that are not owned by African Americans that are in malls, that are in a predominantly African American area, will put black people as the customer service people, right?
As the face of the company.
Right, and they're not trained at all, right? And so we have automatically assumed that when we go into a place and we have a bad experience with someone who looks like us, that is a black-owned business and therefore we cannot support. No, never have you heard anyone white say, I had a bad experience at Target, I'm never going there again.
Yeah.
You've never heard that. But we have somehow conditioned ourselves, all right, to think that black-owned business is bad. I got run through the reamer when I launched an app. And Jason and I were both interviewed by the Tribune. And the article was misleading, the title. But basically, it says something like when you hide your race to promote your business. So it was misleading, but the headline got people to read it.
Yeah.
And I was asked on the technology, there was a guy basically who had a window treatment kind of company. He would go out to the suburbs and the doors would get slammed in his face. When he hired white people to work for him, his sales went through the roof, right? And so they were like, James, well, how come you don't have any black people on your app? Promoting that you're the CEO of this app. And I said, well, it's the same reason the CEO of blackpeoplemeet.com's face isn't on there, because he's white. And she was like, what? I said, exactly. We are conditioned, and this is just human nature. But primarily in the African community, we've got to understand that black-owned businesses are not what we think. But two, you mentioned, like Jason was saying, a lot of times people don't know where these black-owned businesses are. All right, we like you said, we're $1 trillion nation within the African American community. Yet those $1 trillion are not going to African American owned businesses, right? And so we've got to come up with businesses and understand the psychology of buying and purchasing. Why do people go to Target? Because they have what we need, right? So I don't go to a barber. Clearly.
Yeah.
I haven't been since 2012.
Right. But you understand what I'm saying?
I wasn't going to say anything since you brought it up.
Well, yeah, since you've got a full head of hair, which is awesome.
But is that the
dealership, and the name of that car dealership was Shamrock, Lincoln Mercury, Nissan, Saab. We were in Mishawaka, Indiana. My dad had 2 African American employees out of 45 employees, and I used to always think, Dad, why don't you put your name on the business? Why isn't it not Ted Williams or whatever? And he never fully answered, but as I got older, I understood being in an Irish Catholic environment. He had to sort of to do that. And I remember him telling me a story one time where someone came and they were upset with a car and they said they want to meet the owner, and he walks out and they go, no, I want to meet the real owner, because I know you're not the owner. And it was this big thing. And I could imagine that being more difficult, 30 years ago. but still very difficult now. And so how do, James, I know you were going to hop into this, and we don't have much time left, but how do African-American businesses sort of mitigate that? How do they deal with that idea of a subpar service?
I think that what we got to do is black entrepreneurs or black and brown entrepreneurs, we got to think about having a clear message when we're messaging and having a simple message, because a lot of times we have a very good product, but our competition has got a clear and simple message, and they're outselling us.
Yeah.
Great point.
And the other thing I think we can do, and you can go on to someone else after this, is that the idea of sharing your business or communicating your business with anybody, we got to think that our customers, they would like to trust us. They want to trust us. We got to understand that in order to reach them is understand what they want. They want to survive and thrive. That's what everybody wants, to survive and thrive. And you got to bring a message that makes them feel like what your message is going to help them do that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Two things. I think we've got to be mentors. I think I launched a company called Connect3 with some friends. We built the first social video chat social networking service. We had the first mobile video chat where you could video chat with people on your cell phone. This was about 8 years ago. But I didn't have the kind of mentors that could grow. And then the other day I'm looking at a commercial and it says iPhone introduces video chat.
Wow.
And we had that. I had that idea with
Right.
my partners 8 years ago.
Gotcha.
So I think going forward in the community of entrepreneurship, we've got to be able to network.
Right.
We've got to be able to mentor.
Yeah.
We've got to be able to help people move forward.
Yeah. Since you're such a prophet, if you have any more ideas,
I do. I'm working on them now.
just come talk to me. I got you.
You got me.
I promise I won't come out with it.
That's okay. It's all right. I know
Yes,
where you
sir.
live.
I always forget where this stat is from. I probably need to find it when I quote it, but I saw a stat that said if we don't even need to create more black businesses. If every black business that exists right now was able to create 3 more jobs, we would solve the unemployment issue, right?